to get started. I am going to share my screen. So the title of this session is The Impact of COVID-19 on Civic Engagement. And we are doing this with the Rural Policy Student Advocacy Group. It's a new group that was established at Mississippi Valley State University. We are focused on promoting citizen-centered democracy, and we focus on addressing issues and challenges that rural communities face, such as the Mississippi Delta. And we are attempting to make sure that students are adequately prepared to engage in civic activities once they leave Mississippi Valley State University. If you are a student at Valley and you're interested in joining, please look at the link here and fill out the application to join our group. So our speaker today is Asha Tillman. She is a Sustainable Agriculture Specialist at the Mississippi Gulf States Office of the National Center for Appropriate Technology, also known as NCAT, and is located in Jackson, Mississippi. Asha graduated from Mississippi Valley State University in 2013. She has a Bachelor of Science in Biology. And because she graduated from Mississippi Valley State University, I was really excited to have her involved in these web series. She also has a Master's of Science in Animal Science from Tuskegee University. The goal of this session is basically to identify challenges that are impacting civic engagement in 2020 because of the pandemic. And in her presentation, Asha is going to not only identify the challenges, but she's going to discuss ways that we all can be more involved in our communities despite the pandemic. Ask questions in the chat and enjoy the session. So Asha, you can share your screen now.
Okay, thank you, Cassandra. Okay, is it showing on y'all's end? All righty. Well, hello everyone again. Good afternoon. My name is Asha Tillman. I am so excited to share this platform with you all today. So before we get started, I would like to share just a little more about myself in addition to what Dr. Cassandra Hawkins has already shared. I was born and raised on the west side of Jackson, Mississippi, but I have many ties to the Mississippi Delta. I am a Sustainable Agriculture Specialist at the National Center for Appropriate Technology. As Dr. Hawkins mentioned, it's here in Jackson, Mississippi, and our office is called the Mississippi Gulf States Office, where we are a regional office and we service farmers and other communities of food systems in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and some parts of Georgia and Florida. So in case you all missed it, I am a graduate of Mississippi Valley State University, received my bachelor's in biology in 2013. I am a very proud alumni. That's one of the reasons why I'm very excited to share this platform with you all today. I also received a master's in animal science from Tuskegee University in 2017. My experience in community engagement probably began while I was a student at Tuskegee through their cooperative extension program. I work with farmers of Central Alabama in assisting with sustainable farming practices such as silvopasture and agroforestry, if any of you are familiar with that. So that experience sparked a flame, and that has yet to go out. Now, as a specialist at NCAT, I do a lot of community engagement through workshops, conferences, and communal sessions. So it has been a joy because I pride myself as a native Mississippian and serving vulnerable, marginalized communities, pretty much like that I grew up in. It is also an honor because there is no place I'd rather be doing the work that I do than here in Mississippi. Mississippi is a sacred place to me, and it is my home. So I hate that the virus has restricted us from convening in person, but we must continue to be safe, practice social distancing, and be mindful of our health and livelihood. I have learned that visibility and allowing a certain level of comfort are two things that help in being able to engage more virtually. So I don't know, maybe after this presentation, you guys could cut your cameras on and I don't know, with your cup of tea, pen and notepad for all my note takers and share in the chat your name or how you're affiliated with NVSU or to this project or this program. So please be sure to put your name on your screen so we know who you are in the chat. And later, I do want to participate in a little question and answer. So speaking of question and answer, to be respectful of the time we have today, save all your questions until the end of the presentation. Dr. Hawkins has already mentioned that. And so I like to be respectful of others' mental and emotional space too. So please only do these things if you feel comfortable. So today's topic, the impact of COVID-19 on civic engagement. That's the topic, but I'm sure you all would agree when I say COVID-19 has truly impacted us in areas above and beyond civic engagement, right? It has tested everyone's capacities to work, study, and focus on all the things we do in our day-to-day lives. It has affected us in ways that we never would have imagined, but there are ways that we can work through this. Oh, having some technical difficulties. Okay. So what is civic engagement? Some of you may ask. For those of you who already know, great. This is for the people who may know or may want a little more clarity on it. What is civic engagement? So some of the examples of civic engagement are voting, volunteering, participating in group activities, community development projects, rallying, protesting, and organizing. And so what you're doing is you're working to make a difference in the civic life of our communities. What does it mean to be civically engaged? Well, developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and being motivated or having motivation to make that difference in the civic life of our communities. Who is involved in civic engagement? The term civic engagement is often brought up in political platforms or referred to heavily in policy, but it is any individual or group addressing issues of public concern. So that could be reporters, law enforcement, students, philanthropists, farmers, agrarians, educators, social workers, politicians. If your role in whatever you do addresses issues of public concerns, then it is you. How has COVID-19 impacted civic engagement? So one of the major impacts was unemployment. Unemployment rates went up all over the country and the world. Right here in Mississippi, where resources are limited to marginalized communities, unemployment rates top the charts. So this is just a little graph. It's not current to date, but it's just a little graph of unemployment rates nationally, here in Mississippi, and the number of people that were unemployed. So if you will look at in March, when Mississippi announced its first COVID case, the unemployment rate was 5.1%, with about 64,286 people unemployed. That's still a significant amount of people, I would think. But now I want you to look at April. Mississippi's unemployment rate rose to 16.3%. That's almost 200,000 Mississippians, or 1/6 of the labor force. That is the entire city of Jackson population. Now that employment rates have tripled in less than a month's time, let's look at how that impacts the economic security of families affected. So just a couple of civic matters during COVID-19. Unemployment rates have caused a high civic matter. The impact of COVID on Mississippians is a civic matter. Now that CDC, state and government officials have issued guidelines for non-essential workers to not report to work, citizens are faced with abrupt fall in economic security. They are now relying on public assistance for finances, food, and housing. So this means increased exposure to people who are having to seek resources to survive. They are out in densely populated areas, exposed. They didn't have the luxury of working from home or being able to maintain their economic security status. Again, for visualization, this is an entire city of people. So I'm speaking to vulnerable people in communities of non-essential workers, labor force workers, those with pre-existing health conditions, homeless, undocumented people, and those who are extremely limited in resources because they are not or have not been in the past counted on the census, like tribal communities. So I just want to give you a few tips for being civically engaged. One thing, before I go into my next slide, one thing I want to say is due to the virus, we have witnessed unemployment rates fluctuate to extreme numbers of all over the country. And some of the studies have shown that medical industries, food industries, banking and international import-export trades, sports have all taken major hits. Those are things on a global scale. But to be quite frank, I would say the time is now to focus on more of local community-driven resources because you have more control over these things. What happens to them, how they are obtained, how they are made available to your community. What does this vulnerability mean? It means that there will be an increased exposure to COVID because they now have to get out of their homes, stand in unemployment lines in other places where there are large bodies of people. So just keeping all those things in mind when I go through this list of ways that you can stay civically engaged during COVID-19. So the first thing is staying connected. You want to be informed of issues affecting your community. You want to watch your local daily news for resources in food, medical supplies, jobs, clothing, anything that are resources for those in need. Join a community social group and check on your neighbors. It's something as simple as that would make the world of difference for some people. Another thing is respect and obey federal, state, and local laws. These are the things that we've been seeing constantly over and over. I definitely agree with federal, state, and local laws. In fact, I may even do like an extra protection because, as you all know, they took us back from the mandate of staying at home and things like that. Well, I took my own precaution and I still stayed at home because you can just never be too safe. We don't know enough about COVID, so it's better to have an extra blanket of protection for ourselves and for our family and the people that we live and come in contact with. So some of the things to do while respecting and obeying federal, state, and local laws is, we all know, gloves and masks. You want to do your social distancing. You also want to just keep in mindful of washing your hands and things like that. Is really, really, really important to maintain these things. And we are going into another season. We have gone into another season. You all know that this time of the year, the weather changes, flu comes out, pneumonia, all those things like that. This is a time where we need to revisit those rules and regulations that we had before, even if sometimes state and federal officials are not saying that. You have to use your own mind about these things. So, one major thing is respect the rights, beliefs, and opinions of others. So everyone is entitled to their beliefs and opinions, as well as understand some people are in favor of preventative measures and some are not. Although everyone has their right, it is our responsibility as a community to do all we can individually to contribute to the greater cause of saving ourselves and others. Participate in local community. So one thing is you can volunteer only when safe. There are some things that you can do where you can practice social distancing and it's safe for you. And if you feel that, if you feel comfortable in doing that, then I definitely promote that. One thing that does is it allows people to get out of the house. And I'll get into that, but folks who are having to stay at home, that builds up stress and anxiety and things like that. It's good to get out, but you want to continue to maintain that, practicing your social distancing. So some of the things that I've seen people doing and I have done myself are participating in local gardens, volunteer at churches and schools, and sometimes people deliver meals. One thing I will say about participating in local gardens, I have witnessed children enjoy it. So get your family out, get your friends out, but especially kids. Allow them to learn about nature, where their food comes from. It's really, really, really important. I do a lot of work in food systems. And so I'm seeing food from the procurement of the cultivation to the harvesting, the selling is something I'm really, really passionate about. I love homegrown food. I love food that is not filled with chemicals and things like that. And it was something that I was not as exposed to as a child. So I definitely promote you having your kids volunteer or work at a local garden, or if you know someone that has a local farm nearby. I think it's pretty cool. And it's also just a huge learning factor for kids at a young age. The other thing is meal delivery. I'm sorry, meal delivery. Churches do a lot of that. You have food pantries who are participating in meal delivery, and you also have a lot of nonprofit organizations who have started food pantries recently because they've seen a spike in homeless and people who are going without food right now. That is a huge, huge, huge thing. One of our biggest networks here in Mississippi is the Mississippi Food Network. You may not see a lot of food pantries under Mississippi Food Network, but they do sponsor a lot of local food pantries. And so if you go to their website, that will show you where local food pantries are in your location. The Mississippi Delta, I would like to highlight that because it is one of the most food insecure areas of Mississippi. And so please check out their website. They will show you where you can donate food, whether it's directly linked to them or it's linked to a local food pantry. And donating clothes. Clothes are a huge thing right now. I think one of the things that the pandemic did was it excluded the homeless community. And because a lot of people have not been able to get out and they have not been able to interact and do those engaging things with the community, homeless have gone without food. They have gone without water and other essential needs. And so just keeping all those things in mind, donate clothes, toiletries, even school supplies to schools, that would be really helpful. So just donating is really huge right now. And I encourage people to get out, again, practicing your social distancing while you're doing that to stay afloat. And another thing is support. So if you are able to buy locally sourced produce and other foods, farmers, especially right now, are hurting because some farmers were able to set, small scale farmers that I know of were able to get contracts and sell to local restaurants. Well, now their restaurants are closed or reopening at this present moment. They've lost those contracts. That's their livelihood. Um, I, for one, like to buy locally sourced food because it's not preserved, of which a lot of our produce is preserved. So I like to support local farmers in their harvest. I like to buy their food. It's fresh, it's locally grown, it's not a lot of preservatives, it's healthy. So support your local farmers. And another thing I would say is when you support local farmers and businesses, you're basically recycling the dollar in your community. So that creates like a huge economic canvas build for your community or your city or your town or wherever it is that you live. So I know that right now it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard going transitioning to some of the things that we do, working and doing all those things virtually. Now is a time where everyone is nervous. If you're not so tech savvy like myself, it took me forever to get this PowerPoint together. So I thank y'all for being gracious. Please be gracious on me on this because I am not that great with technology. But I will say this, stepping into a position of leadership is not always, a thing of understanding what you're doing, but you can grow into it. And so one of the things that I have done is I've explored opportunities to engage community through virtual activities and things like that. That puts you in position of leadership. And when you are in position of leadership, that gives you power. And, it just gives you the ability to have control over things that you normally wouldn't. So I definitely promote everyone doing something out of your comfort zone or whatever it is you may be, just gain some type of experience in a time like this, because we don't know what tomorrow may hold. We don't know what next year may hold. So some of those things that I've seen other people doing, and I've even experimented with myself, are social media. So everybody know these icons. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have YouTube, we have, going back, and we have Zoom. So these are some of the things that platforms people are using to get really creative right now. I have seen people do cooking demos. I have even watched a tutorial on Zoom on TikTok. So that's really fun. This is the time that we're living in now. I know a lot of people may not settle with the new technology, but I'm just encouraging anyone that is watching this right now, please just experiment for a second, give it 5 or 10 minutes to try something new. Another thing for people who are not so tech savvy, you have folks who can blog. You have vlogging, that's for the YouTubers. You have a lot of people who are doing podcasts and simple old school start a pen pal group or a book reading club. These are all things that you can experiment to keep yourself afloat. One thing that I like to do is inspire others. So right now, we all know that people are facing mental, emotional stresses. You don't know what people are going through at home. So one thing you want to be mindful of are those mental and emotional things. Just be mindful of people's actions. Be intentional about how you're engaging with people. Something as simple as a hey, hello, how are you? And saying it and meaning it means a lot to some people right now. Because like I said, there are people who are at home and they really have no scapegoat from what they're dealing with at home. Some people left home to get away from things. So just keeping all those things in mind, and that inspires others. So another thing is being mindful of those excluded right now. One of the things that when I'm working with the group of people I work with, elderly, indigenous communities, undocumented communities, and the disabled are at the top of my radar. Why? Because they are always excluded in some form, shape, way, or fashion. Please, please, please be mindful. If you're going to donate, if you're going to volunteer or anything like that, keep this group of people in your mind because they are the most vulnerable. And the last thing is, for yourself, do not be afraid to be vulnerable. We all know that this is a time where everyone is learning new things. You're getting adjusted to new things. This is not the time for judgment or criticism. This is the time to step up and experience new things. And vulnerability is a good thing. We're all vulnerable right now. We're all learning new things. And so therefore, no one is perfect. So I definitely promote that. And that pretty much concludes my presentation. But one thing I wanted to say was, if you have relocated or you are temporarily living somewhere else, please register to vote. And or fill out and return an absentee ballot to your local circuit clerk's office. Stay on top of voting dates and things like that. We are in the voting season. It is very, very critical that everyone is registered to vote or you are able to submit an absentee ballot. And one more thing, stay active. It increases mental cognization. Just right now, everyone needs to exercise as much as they can, eat healthy, and it'll help you remain positive during these times. And that's it.
Thank you, Asha, for sharing. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, nor do I see question and answer, so I will start it off. Could you tell us more about why you got involved with civic engagement?
So right now, I am a co-coordinator of the Mississippi Food Systems Fellowship. This fellowship is designed to push people of color, of Black, African American, Indigenous, Latinx, Hispanic communities. We are pushing these people into power and being able to say, this is what our food system is going to look like in our region. So we have selected these fellows from 4 regions of Mississippi, and it's the Choctaw community that's in Philadelphia. We have 5 fellows down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We have 5 fellows here in Central Mississippi or the Jackson region. And then we also have those fellows in the Delta. And it's 20 fellows in all. And we have a facilitation team. We have a steering committee. And it's just a beautiful process engaging with them and being able to learn their local food systems. They're all very passionate about obtaining access to healthy foods for their local communities and marginalized communities, those people of need. One of the things that COVID has done is it has stopped us from convening. We initially planned 4 different gatherings in all of those 4 regions. And our last gathering would have been last month. And we have not been able to do that. But while engaging with those fellows virtually, we saw a lot of things, like mental and emotional capacities breaking down and things like that. And so this is where I dive in a little deeper into civic engagement and being intentional about how we're doing it. They also shared some of the things that they've been doing. And so that's why I shared the things that you can be doing to stay civically engaged are donating and supporting and You have farmers who have what you call CSA boxes, where you subscribe to a food box and they do them every week or every month, however often they'll do them. And these are always just staying on top of community engagement and connecting with folks during the time where we can't do these things in person.
Okay. So Michelle has a question for you. In the food system network, like the fellows, how do you see stepping into civic engagement? How do you see them stepping into civic engagement and dealing with COVID? That's a good question, Michelle.
Yes, thank you, Michelle. So one of the hugest things, there's so many ways that the fellows have been stepping into civic engagement during COVID. But right now, they're looking at policy, the access to food, some of the fact that there are food insecure counties that are so bad that there are no grocery stores there. That's all policy reform. And so those are some of the main things that the fellows are focusing on. But you know, people are still able to get out right now. They're still able to go to farms and harvest and do CSA boxes, like I mentioned before, and share these produce with vulnerable communities. They're able to hand out foods and things like that. So a lot of the fellows, they're just revisiting, like I said, policy. They're able to work with other organizations who are engaging in civil matters and things like that.
Okay. Lakeisha has another question. She wants you to talk about your greatest barrier.
Hmm. My greatest barrier, my greatest barrier during these times um, is probably getting adjusted to technology. I'm a country girl. I like to be outside. I don't like sitting on a computer. I don't like just being inside all the time. I like to get out. I like talking to people in person. Um, and so one of my biggest barriers is knowing how to interact with people virtually. That is a huge thing, especially to someone who, like myself, who prides themselves on in-person interaction. And you know how they say catching vibes and things like that. I love to pick up on energy and things like that. You can't do that on the computer. You can't do that virtually. So that's one of my biggest barriers.
Thanks, Lakeisha. That's a great question. Are there any more questions? Michelle has another one. How do you reach community members to engage with you virtually? And that's a good question, especially when, so I am now back in a rural area. You know that I moved back home to Water Valley. I live on a farm, and access to internet, even though we have Wi-Fi, is not the fastest. It's not like when I was living in Brandon. This is a great, great question. How would you answer that question?
Um, so we are allowed to convene sometimes in person. Like again, I said social distancing is first and foremost. So sometimes I do get out. I also work with the Pineywood School. It's in Rankin County. And I like to go down there and work with the students on their farm. Their farm is really, really huge. So we just go outside and, you know, I talk to them about cattle and sheep and things like that, and talk to them about some of the future plans that I have, and along with my colleagues and my partners for the school. And so it's safe like that. That's one of the ways that I reach the community members. Another way that I like to get involved with community members, again, I said churches, um, nonprofit organizations are also accepting volunteers and things like that. Yes, it is out in the public, but again, I say you can social distance virtually. A lot of people are a part of different networks. So you have a lot of email systems going on here. Again, social media. Everyone is on social media now. You can share whatever you like with social media, join a virtual Zoom call or something like that. That is, I think, one of the major ways that myself and other folks are still engaging and reaching members in the community.
Okay, so there's another question. Do you see churches, school districts, and nonprofit organizations using WhatsApp, text trees, and things like that to keep in touch. I know in my classroom, I use Remind. It's a text messaging app that was used mostly in K through 12, but now I use it to remind my students of assignments. Last semester, well, the spring semester, I used it so that I could just check in on students because we abruptly did not go back for the spring semester just to see how everyone was doing, feeling, um, being in spaces they were not accustomed to. So how do you see churches, school districts, and nonprofit organizations using technology and things like WhatsApp, text trees to keep in touch?
Well, I know personally, I am a part of several groups on Facebook, fitness groups. Um, I am on WhatsApp. I am on GroupMe. Uh, and all of these apps have advanced recently because of COVID to where you are allowed to do video calls and things like that. I saw it. In fact, I want to say back in April or May, I've had GroupMe on my phone for forever. And it's one of the ways that I keep in contact with the fellows. And I one day logged on and I saw that there was a feature for Skype. And I said, that was fast. So technology is definitely advancing. It's very innovative now, and it allows you to do all of these things. So yes, Michelle, I do see churches and other nonprofit organizations using these apps and just other technology to keep in touch.
Okay, so you have another question in the Q&A. Ms. Tillman, do you believe that social distancing has also shed light on these challenges in rural communities as a country? That's a good question, Rashawn. That's my student too. I'm liking all the students asking questions.
um, do I feel that social distancing has affected? I may need that question one more time just to be
Okay,
sure I
do you
understand.
believe that social distancing has also shed light on these challenges in rural communities?
Yes, yes, and yes. I always think about rural communities because I'm connected with several. I'm connected with several in so many ways. So I do know that I'm gonna see how I can make this connect. So in rural communities where, let's say, for example, they have one grocery store or something like that, it's kind of hard for folks to come out of their houses to go 30 minutes, 45 minutes away to get the local resources they need, food resources, medical supplies, and things like that. So, and I could be answering this wrong,
So let me
but
jump in. Let me jump in so you can
okay.
process the question. So now that I am living in a rural community, I moved back in with my parents. It's me, my 4 children, my 2 nephews. I have a younger sister, and my parents. And so for us to social distance, it's been great because my parents' house is so big. But a lot of rural communities don't have the luxury that we have. So we all have our own spaces. Some days I might not see anybody if I don't open my door. But there are some families who they have the same amount of people or more, but they can't social distance. So how do you think that is being exposed now as a challenge?
Okay. Yeah, I definitely was not thinking on that track, but I think one of the things is folks are definitely being tested just in one household amongst trusts. And so that's where some of those practices and those guidelines come in of you washing your hands and you wearing your mask when you're out in public and things like that. I saw a spurge of videos where people were staying in the house with several other people. They couldn't socially distance. And one person come down with COVID. And so what a lot of people did was they isolated that person. They had one whole wing or one room to their house. And in that house, they would literally wash everything that came out of that room. That person had their own set of dishes, food, soap, whatever it is that they needed to survive. They were quarantined in that room. So that is very unfortunate, I believe, because it's very hard, and I know it's very hard. Um, this is just a lot of work, especially if you're in a home where you have elderly with pre-existing health conditions and things like that. You always have to be mindful of that.
Right. Right. You're
So
absolutely right. So I have to take a shower. I spray my wig. And I try to, if I know I've been around a lot of people, I avoid being around my parents until I have like changed clothes and been away from them for a while. Bailey has another question. Um, do you have any advice for students directly impacted by COVID-19 and trying to maintain schooling? That's a good question, Bailey. I think Bailey's in my class too. Um, so as a professor, I struggle with enforcing deadlines while being empathetic towards students and their experiences with COVID-19. So this question can even apply to me as we maneuver towards the end of the semester. What advice do you have?
the advice that I have, and this was even before COVID for me, you always want to keep a good line of communication with your professors. You let them know, hey, my Wi-Fi is not working today. I need to go to the library, but the library is closed. Or I have an aunt, but that aunt is out of town. Just keeping that constant line of communication and being very transparent about what people are going through. I do believe it also helps to be transparent about emotions, even though I know some people feel that that makes them very vulnerable. A lot of people are going through things right now. And a lot of times the mental and emotional things weigh way heavier than physical things, physical constraints and things like that. So just being transparent and keeping an open line of communication with your professors and with your counterparts, your peers, your classmates and things like that. If you have group projects, just being as transparent as you can be about what you're doing in your life.
Okay. Michelle had another question. Are you familiar with mutual aid networks in the communities you work with in Mississippi?
I am not familiar with mutual aid. I've heard a couple of things about them, but I don't have any direct ties with mutual aid.
Okay. She has another question. How Aisha and you are seeing communities come together to help themselves? That's a good question, Michelle.
Mhm.
I was actually in the research exchange meeting with the Winston Public Scholars yesterday, and that was one of our questions. So for me, I'm not seeing, but I'm also not in the Jackson metro area anymore. I'm not seeing a lot of communities come together where I am. I'm located in North Mississippi, Water Valley, which is outside of Oxford, Mississippi, the University of Mississippi Ole Miss. And so I'm not seeing it at this time. I'm seeing a lot of people being for themselves, being for their families, and a lot of people, especially in rural communities, they're isolated. My family are older, our relatives are older. They're in their 60s or early 70s, so they aren't being involved in a lot of things. I do notice that churches are starting to have service again, but I also have noticed those same churches not practicing social distancing, not wearing masks. And I'm also seeing individuals not wearing masks now that the mandate is not in place. So actually seeing communities come together where I am right now is not happening. But I am aware of other people, entities, especially in the Jackson metro area, that are coming together to address COVID-19 and to make sure everyone else is okay.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, why do I think communities are not coming together? I'm thinking because of the poverty level. Where I'm from, Oxford is a more rich area in comparison to Water Valley. And so Oxford has a lot more resources, and they often have activities that support the individuals in their community. But in my community, Yellow Bush County, there's a lot of poor people. So a lot of people are basically looking out for themselves and looking out for their families within their household. Is this because people are kind of in survival mode or not really believing COVID is that bad? So I think Michelle is part of both of those instances. I know that a lot of the African Americans that I'm aware of in the community, they're in survival mode. A lot of them work hourly jobs, so they cannot afford to miss work. And there has been instances where my dad has discussed, he works at an automotive plant as a supervisor in my hometown, and people know that they are sick, but what they do is they take Tylenol or leave so that the temperature will go down, and they have passed the temperature test, but 4 hours later around noon, they're really showing sickness, and then they have to leave knowing that they have COVID. But they're trying to pay their bills. So can you actually fault them? Um, the dynamic too is that COVID is existing based on politics. However, with that argument, how do you explain it happening in Paris and New Zealand and Egypt and Africa and all over the world? It's not just US politics. I think people really don't understand how bad it is until it impacts their family or someone they know. For instance, I went to see my attorney last week. Both of her parents died from COVID. So she was adamant about wearing masks. And I don't have anyone that I know specifically that has died from it, but I do know of friends that have it, and they describe their experiences, and it's an awful experience. I think that we need to really start looking at how communities are even just coming together to check on each other. When I was growing up, on Sundays, you visited someone's house and stayed for hours. And if it was the winter and it was an old person, you would burn up even without a coat on. But you don't see that dynamic now. People are really staying to themselves. And I really think that we need to get more involved, civic engagement, even if it's just having a group meet chat to check on people and say how you doing. So I'm not a big phone person, but now I found myself calling people just to so they can hear someone's voice, because some people don't see anybody. Did that answer your question, Michelle? And Aisha, she said, do you see similar dynamics where you work? So you're where I used to be. So you probably can explain more about communities coming together, or are we in survival mode?
I feel like it's a combination of both because I am a part of a couple of organizations who are doing civic engagement. So you have one organization that's on the west side of Jackson. It's called Cooperation West Jackson. They have several gardens all over the city. They have resource agents who are able to provide resources for those in need. Everything is done virtually for the most part, but if you are needing to meet with someone in person, they do have someone at their office, but it's only by appointments and things like that. They are reaching out to mostly the homeless community, and they are also reaching out to parents of marginalized communities who may or may not have access to Wi-Fi for their students who are doing virtual homeschooling and things like that. So those are some of the things, but I do also see within, let's say, one portion of Jackson on the west side, I do see smaller groups in the community where they're kind of reserved off. They only do things by trust, right? And I don't blame anyone. You really do not know who is practicing social distancing or anything right now. So you have to be very, very careful. I will admit I am probably one of those people. I will not come in contact with anyone I do not know unless I have to. And that's in passing, like going to a grocery store or something like that. The one thing I will say is with my job, even here, I am the only one that works out of our office. There's 4 people that works in my office, and I am here almost every day, but I am the only one here. So we're still following those mandate rules of social distancing. And I will say that most of my coworkers really do respect that I am here in the office by myself. So they let me know when they come in. So they say, hey, I'm here. Just letting you know that I'm here and we all have masks. I do not have a mask on right now because I cannot talk and wear a mask at the same time. But those are just some of the things that, those are some of the ways that I've seen communities come together. Like you said, Dr. Hawkins, churches, outreach organizations and programs, I've seen them host things. I've also seen them not practice the guidelines. And, it's a very concerning thing because I think people just get kind of too relaxed. And like I said, we're going into a changing of the season right now. So we're seeing the weather change, which means, the flu and other viruses may come up. So that concerns me. And if I see it, and I have contact with someone who is involved, I will address it to them. I will let them know, hey, y'all, please continue to practice those guidelines because we don't want to see numbers spike back up. Another thing is, I am so adamant about these things because, the vulnerable communities are the communities of color. These are your Black communities. These are your Hispanic communities. These are people who do not have health insurance. These are people who are not working. They're not even eating healthy. And so I really push for those things right now because it's hurting us all.
Okay. Well, it's 3:57. I don't think I see any more questions in the chat, but if you do think of any questions that you might have for Asha or me, um, you can shoot me an email. You can Google me, the Bougie Professor online, and I will get those questions to Asha. But I just want to give anybody else a chance to ask one more question because we have like 3 minutes. So I'm looking in the chat, and Asha has put her contact information if you have any questions. Um, I'm hoping that you enjoyed this session. We have another one next week on Friday, 6 p.m. We're going to look at food policy work. Kenya Collins from Mississippi Food Courts is the guest speaker. And the following week on the 19th, we will have a psychologist from Xavier University talk to you about how to survive during a time of racial injustice, social justice issues, and a pandemic. He is a clinical psychologist. So please stay tuned to my post about the upcoming sessions. I really appreciate all of you for joining. And have a wonderful weekend. Please be safe, practice social distancing. I'm going into mama mode now. Please take your vitamins. Please eat as healthy as you can. I am a junk food queen, but I've tried to stop because you want to make sure that your immune system is strong. Have a good weekend.